Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important developments in the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine has carried out a long-range strike that reportedly cut off a key Russian supply line. This action has major implications for the course of the war, for both militaries' logistics, and for how the conflict may evolve in the months ahead. This strike marks another significant moment in a war that has been defined by shifting tactics, long-range weapons, and battles not only on the front lines but deep within each country. Infrastructure. What makes this event stand out is how directly it targeted the flow of resources that keep Russia's military machine running. Fuel, ammunition, and transport routes are the hidden lifelines of any modern army, and Ukraine's operation struck directly at one of those vital arteries. The reported target was a major fuel pipeline in Russia, one that connects several important refineries near Moscow, Ryazan, and Nizhny Novgorod. According to multiple reports, this network, often called the Koltsovoy pipeline, moves millions of tons of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel every year. It's a crucial link in Russia's ability to sustain both its civilian economy and its military logistics. By striking it, Ukraine has hit something far more valuable than a single depot or warehouse. It has attacked the very flow of energy that fuels Russian operations. Ukraine's intelligence service claimed responsibility for the operation, and satellite images as well as local reports from Russian regions suggest that all three lines of the pipeline were disrupted. The damage reportedly stopped or heavily reduced the transport of fuel through that corridor. While Russia has not confirmed the full extent of the destruction, it did acknowledge an incident and partial suspension of fuel movement. For Ukraine, this operation represents the evolution of its war strategy. At the start of the war, Ukraine's military was focused on defending territory and repelling attacks close to its borders. Over time, as it gained better intelligence and technology, it began launching long-range strikes deep into Russian territory. These attacks are not just symbolic. They are calculated efforts to undermine Russia's ability to wage war. This latest strike follows a series of similar operations in which Ukraine used drones and long-range missiles to hit oil refineries, storage tanks, and energy terminals far inside Russia. These attacks have reached targets hundreds of kilometers away, sometimes even near Moscow. Reports from independent analysts suggest that these strikes have taken out around one-fifth of Russia's refining capacity in recent months. Cutting a pipeline might not sound as dramatic as a missile strike on a city, but strategically, it's extremely effective. Pipelines are the arteries of a war economy. Without constant fuel flow, tanks can't move, aircraft can't take off, and supply trucks grind to a halt. Fuel is one of the most precious commodities in modern warfare, and losing it can paralyze entire fronts. By severing this supply line, Ukraine is forcing Russia to reroute deliveries, rely on trucks or trains instead of pipelines, and spend more resources just to maintain the same level of logistics. Beyond the physical damage, this operation sends a strong psychological and political message. It shows that Ukraine can reach deep into the Russian interior, challenging the sense of safety that Moscow once enjoyed. It also demonstrates to Ukraine's allies that their support and technology are paying off, that Ukraine can take the fight to the very infrastructure sustaining Russia's invasion. For Russia, the consequences are serious. Every time Ukraine hits an oil refinery or a pipeline, it disrupts fuel supplies not only for the military but also for civilian use. Shortages drive up prices, create public frustration, and force the government to spend time and resources on repairs instead of military operations. Even if Russia can repair the pipeline, Doing so requires manpower, equipment, and time, all while Ukraine may continue launching new attacks. Fuel shortages have a ripple effect. If military convoys have to wait longer for refueling, or if supply chains become unreliable, the pace of operations slows. Troops on the ground might experience delays in getting supplies, spare parts, or reinforcements. Air operations, which depend heavily on jet fuel, could also face limitations. A disruption in logistics can turn a strong army into a slow, reactive one. Another important factor is morale. For Russian troops, knowing that their supply lines are under constant threat affects confidence. Soldiers may begin to question whether the support system behind them is stable. Meanwhile, for Ukrainian troops and civilians, news of successful strikes deep inside Russia boosts morale, proving that they can strike back against a much larger foe. It's also important to note that long-range operations like this one rely heavily on intelligence and precision technology. Ukraine's ability to locate, target, and destroy such critical infrastructure shows that it has developed advanced surveillance and targeting capabilities. Some of this comes from Western support, while some comes from Ukraine's own growing defense industry. This combination of innovation and international aid is allowing Ukraine to redefine modern warfare. However, these kinds of operations also carry risks. Every time Ukraine hits a target inside Russia, it risks escalating the conflict. Moscow could respond with more massive missile barrages against Ukrainian cities or infrastructure in retaliation. There's also the concern among Ukraine's Western partners about the potential for escalation beyond Ukraine's borders. Balancing effectiveness with restraint is one of the hardest challenges Ukraine faces in this phase of the war. From a strategic perspective, this attack is part of a broader shift in Ukraine's approach. Instead of focusing only on the front lines in Donetsk or Zaporizhia, Ukraine is increasingly using long-range attacks to weaken Russia's industrial and logistic backbone. This approach reflects an understanding that wars of attrition are not won only by capturing territory. They are won by destroying the opponent's ability to sustain the fight. Cutting off a supply line does more than stop the movement of fuel. It forces the enemy to spread its defenses, to guard more sites, and to invest more in repair and redundancy. Russia now must protect thousands of kilometers of infrastructure pipelines, railways, power plants, refineries, all vulnerable to drones or missiles. The cost of defending every target is enormous, and that cost alone is a victory for Ukraine. In warfare, logistics are often invisible but absolutely decisive. History shows that many wars have been lost not because of defeats on the battlefield, but because of failed logistics. Napoleon's invasion of Russia, Germany's struggles in World War II, and even modern conflicts in the Middle East all show that armies starved of supplies eventually collapse. Ukraine is applying that same principle. Make the war too costly, too complex, and too logistically fragile for Russia to sustain indefinitely. But there's also the question of timing. For these strikes to have maximum effect, Ukraine needs to synchronize them with its ground operations. If a supply line is cut but not exploited quickly, Russia may repair it or find alternate routes. The real impact comes when such disruptions coincide with offensive operations that take advantage of the enemy's temporary weakness. Observers will be watching closely in the coming weeks to see if Ukraine launches renewed offensives that align with these strikes. There's another dimension worth discussing: the economic and political impact inside Russia. Fuel disruptions and refinery attacks affect domestic markets. Russians could see higher fuel prices or shortages at gas stations. While the government will likely prioritize military needs, civilian inconvenience adds to public dissatisfaction. The perception that Ukraine can repeatedly strike inside Russian territory undermines the Kremlin's message that everything is under control. From the Ukrainian perspective, these strikes also serve an important diplomatic purpose. They demonstrate self-reliance and determination to partners in Europe and North America. By showing that it can carry out complex long-range missions with limited resources, Ukraine strengthens its argument for continued military and financial support. Each successful strike becomes both a military and political message. Ukraine is not only surviving, but adapting and fighting smart. At the same time, Ukraine must manage expectations. A single successful strike, even one that destroys a major supply line, doesn't immediately change the overall balance of the war. Russia's vast size and resources mean it can repair or reroute supplies. The key for Ukraine is persistence, keeping up the pressure and forcing Russia into a continuous state of logistical strain. That kind of long-term disruption can be more effective than any one spectacular hit. This event also underscores how the war has expanded beyond traditional battlefields. Both countries are targeting each other's energy systems, communication networks, and infrastructure. Drones now travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. Cyber attacks, disinformation, and sabotage are all part of the same campaign. The battlefield today includes pipelines, data cables, power grids, and industrial plants. The strike on the Russian pipeline is one piece of this larger, multi-dimensional war. For analysts and observers, this development shows that Ukraine's military doctrine has matured. Early in the war, many believed Ukraine could only defend. Now, it's conducting deep, precise, and coordinated strikes that shape the entire conflict. This level of sophistication takes planning, intelligence sharing, and technical expertise that few nations at war achieve under pressure. Russia's response to these strikes will likely be twofold. On one hand, it will strengthen defenses around key infrastructure and perhaps relocate critical assets farther from Ukraine's reach. On the other, it will almost certainly retaliate. Recent Russian missile and drone barrages against Ukrainian power stations and cities may be part of that retaliation cycle. Each side is trying to cripple the other's ability to endure the coming winter and sustain operations through it. The coming months will test whether these strikes can truly change the rhythm of the war. If Russian logistics slow and its front line operations become less coordinated, Ukraine's strategy will be validated. But if Russia adapts quickly, repairs the damage, and continues its offensive, then Ukraine will need to escalate the scale or frequency of such operations to maintain pressure. For now, though, the immediate effect is clear. Russia has suffered a major disruption to one of its most important supply lines. The attack highlights the growing reach of Ukraine's weapons and intelligence capabilities. It also shows that Russia's vast territory and infrastructure are not immune to disruption. The psychological impact of that realization is itself a powerful weapon. The lesson from this development is that wars are increasingly wars of networks and logistics. The side that can protect its own supply lines while disrupting the enemy's has a decisive advantage. Ukraine understands this and is acting accordingly. The war has entered a phase where strategic strikes on pipelines, depots, and refineries may shape the battlefield as much as traditional offensives. As we move forward, we should keep an eye on a few things. First, whether Ukraine continues to expand its long-range capabilities and target other parts of Russia's infrastructure. Second, how Russia adapts, whether it can restore its fuel flows quickly or whether the shortages begin to affect front-line troops. And third, how this dynamic influences the political calculations of both sides as winter approaches and the cost of war continues to rise. For Ukraine, success will depend not just on damaging Russia's logistics, but on maintaining its own. Striking deep is impressive, but defending its cities, grid, and supply routes remains just as crucial. The ability to balance offense and defense will determine how effective this strategy ultimately becomes. Still, this moment shows that Ukraine is far from powerless. Despite facing a larger and heavily armed adversary, it continues to innovate, adapt, and fight smart. The long-range strike that cut off a key Russian supply line is not just a tactical success. It's a signal that Ukraine's strategic vision is expanding. It's fighting a 21st century war in which technology, intelligence, and logistics matter as much as territory. As this war continues, both sides will learn and evolve. Russia will repair, defend, and retaliate. Ukraine will innovate, strike, and adapt. Each move leads to another in a long contest of endurance, creativity, and resilience. But one thing is certain. Cutting off a key supply line has changed the equation, at least for now. It shows that Ukraine can hit Russia where it hurts the most, not just on the battlefield, but in the lifeblood of its war machine. And that's where things stand today. The strike has made headlines around the world, reminding everyone that even after years of war, the balance can shift suddenly. It has shown that modern conflict is not only about who holds the ground, but who controls the flow of energy, supplies, and momentum. Thank you for watching and staying with us through this deep dive. If you found this analysis useful, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future updates. Let us know what you think about this development in the comments below. Do you believe this strike could mark a turning point, or is it just another step in a long war of attrition? We'll be following this story closely as it continues to unfold.